Top 25 games this week. Let's get straight to it. Top 25 games. There's not many bangers. We showed a couple of them. And by the way, just in case you go, wait a minute, where's Kansas State? Where's BYU? Yesterday we showed the Big 12 schedule, and yesterday we showed those who are ranked. So here are the teams outside of the Big 12, with Ohio State on the road against Northwestern, Texas in that longtime rivalry. Steve Sarkisian in a great quote, I think he's used this before. He goes, I don't know what Darrell Royal did to Arkansas, but their fans absolutely hate us. They played, I think, in 19 or 20. Arkansas won pretty big, and Sarkisian said he'd never seen anything like it, the viciousness of the Hogs fans.
Yeah, I think that one a couple weeks ago before Ole Miss took them apart, Arkansas was starting to play well, and Texas had just played Vanderbilt. I thought Arkansas could, and they might still, because of Taylon Green and some of the things on offense, give Texas a scare, but Ole Miss might have broken their defense. So yeah. I don't know if it'll be 63-31 or whatever it was a couple weeks ago when they played Ole Miss, but I think Texas will do well. But I do think that the fans will be fired up, and early on that game, they're going to get Arkansas's best shot, and they're going to be loaded for bear against the Horns.
It's a great history. It's a great rivalry. It goes back to that incredible game. What was it, in 1969? The game that was in Arkansas, and Texas winning, I believe it was 15-14. James Street, the late James Street, was the quarterback. Texas won that national title, and the next year they split the national title with Nebraska. Clemson at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's now all of a sudden a little bit shaky. They are hosting Clemson. Then you see other games, including there's some of those gimme games that people have in the SEC late in the year. Not everybody, but some. LSU at Florida after Florida was just stomped by Texas. Missouri, South Carolina, both inside the top 25. They're playing. Oregon on the road against Wisconsin. Tennessee, Georgia. And then also teams that are off this week, Indiana, Ole Miss, Miami, and also Army. Any of those, Craig, in particular among the top 25 that catch your attention more than others?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, Georgia, that's a top 7 matchup there between the Vols and the Bulldogs out in Athens. Tennessee feeling like they are right there in the playoff mix, but 2 losses, it makes it a little bit more dicey. And obviously Georgia can't afford to lose another game, or else they're probably out with 3 losses. And you've got to start looking with 3 weeks to go at the SEC championship standings. And so Georgia desperately needs to win this game, or they're going to kind of be spoiled as far as 2024 goes. But that one definitely jumps out. I think Boise, just tracking them. San Jose State's a bowl team. It's on the road. So in terms of just watching Ashton Genty and Boise State try to play spoiler, or in his case, win the Heisman, I think all of their games take on an extra layer of interest. So that one for the G5 and Heisman purposes is an interesting game. Clemson and Pitt's another one because both teams are actually ranked, although Clemson kind of hanging on, and quite frankly, Pittsburgh hanging on by a thread as well. Hard to see whoever's getting their 3rd loss. I mean, Pittsburgh's at 18, so I guess they wouldn't necessarily drop 7 spots all the way out, but why not? They would have lost 3 games in a row, so they probably deserve to drop all the way out of the top 25. So to me, that's a top 25 elimination game. But then again, what does the top 25 matter? Because the real poll comes out tonight with the actual rankings that mean something. So, the AP still dresses these up and makes them look good, but they'll be probably mostly the same tonight, but those are the rankings we'll really go by, and that one should probably still be in that frame, so that is of interest to me.
With Clemson and Pittsburgh, you mentioned, Craig, it's a do-or-die game for either of them if they want to still have that outside shot of the ACC title game. Another loss for either team puts them behind it with 2 weeks to go. And Clemson, with only one more, I think this might even be their last ACC game. I got to check. I don't know if they have a Wofford in there in the middle, like they usually do before they
Citadel.
So yeah, they got Citadel and then South Carolina. So, and look, South Carolina would take them out of playoff consideration anyway. But if they don't win against Pittsburgh, they're probably not going to the ACC title game. So a big one for Clemson and Dabo because they'll still need help to get in the ACC title game. But right now, if they don't beat Pittsburgh, then there's no help that they can get.
Yeah, and so there's really not many bangers. Actually, in the Big 12 with Colorado hosting Utah, BYU at home against Kansas, Kansas State hosting Arizona State. That might be as good as any game other than the one with the Georgia and Tennessee. So the college football playoff standings will come out this evening. And I was watching an interview with, I believe it was Heather Dinich, and she was on Pat McAfee. And she said, don't discount anybody from the SEC that has 3 losses. Do not discount them from making the college football playoff. Now, we've discussed that before, and we will wait to see. Like, if Georgia loses, they'll have 3. And then she said, but also, some teams in the SEC with 3 losses are not the same as others. And that's already out there. And she's covered a lot of these playoff committees and all that other stuff, but that was out there. I don't think it should matter who you are if you have 3 losses, but also just a note that was out there, which I'm sure even after this weekend or last weekend, we will see that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, she's out there just giving out the PR message basically that the committee wants delivered. I mean, that's what she does for the most part, and that's clearly something that's going to be a topic of conversation, I guess, after last night is where maybe some of these teams fall, because you've got an Ole Miss with 2 losses, a Georgia with 2 losses, an Alabama with 2 losses, LSU with 2 losses, Missouri with 2 losses. Like, I know Missouri, LSU aren't really in this mix, but yeah, she's basically talking about Georgia and Alabama and Ole Miss. That's who she's talking about. And I just, the thing about it is I understand it, man. Like, it all depends. It's like, I brought this over. How many top 25 wins does your team have? It depends on what you want to say, right? Are you going by the actual now rankings, or are you going by when you beat them rankings, right? Because then everybody uses whatever best benefits their argument, right? So you're like, oh, well, that team was ranked at the time, so we're going to count that one because it gives us 4 rather than if we didn't, it would only give us 3. So I guess it just kind of depends on your vantage point and how you view things. And so if you believe it's really just pound for pound who's the best and records don't matter, which of course you'd probably think that way if you're an SEC fan, because you've got Georgia with 2 losses and Alabama with 2 losses, and inevitably now we're arguing about somebody with 3 losses getting in, then that might be your vantage point. But if you're somebody who feels like, hey, the record should still matter, then they're kind of ruining that by going, well, no, 3 losses is cool. It just depends on who you are. But we know that argument's only for one part of the room. And I'm not one of these guys that's like, let's make everything out to be like the big bad boogeyman. Everything's against me and against my interest in all of that. But I just don't think that argument's made for anybody else other than them. And maybe it's valid because they do have so many quality teams. But, yeah, it's just you would not hear that said about the Big 12 or the ACC or whatever. And that's what kind of gets annoying after a while is how the stage is sort of set.
Yeah, there are teams that are really, really, really good teams based on the algorithm of a conference, a schedule that might just be like a meat cleaver. So there may be an exception or two, but if it's, yeah, you're right. Like Iowa State lost, they're done. Then they lost again. They're really done. Now, if they win the Big 12 title, if they get into it, that's one thing.
There's a conversation about if BYU lost their first game in the championship game, whether they'd make the playoff or not. Now, yeah. I know that's kind of ridiculous.
If they were undefeated?
Yeah, if they lost in the championship game,
yeah.
If they were undefeated. There's actually a conversation, like, I don't know. You don't know if they'd get in losing their only – and I'm a guy who's like, let's get through it because they nearly lost last week, because it was what I was kind of trying to tell BYU fans who were all like, oh, my God, I can't believe it. It's like, hey, how about you just keep winning – and not worry about having a buffer. And that's probably the advice they should keep taking, because I think this weekend's another game that you can't just, look past. But, yeah, I mean, there's that actual conversation. Like, they've already ruled out 2 Big 12 teams unless, like, a particular scenario happens where BYU loses only to Colorado. But even then, it's like, well, I don't know. And BYU can't lose before then. It's such a double standard, and that's where I say it's your vantage point. Are you going eye test? Well, I know Ole Miss has 2 more losses, but if you watch them, they'd beat BYU by 12.
Yeah.
Or are you going by like what they've actually accomplished? And I think it's just nobody goes by the same playbook. They go by what's best for their narrative, and it makes it all very confusing rather than just like we all go by the same metric,
There are factors that go into these things, and that's why I think that there needs to be like a couple of the several computer metrics that they create an average from, and then you can get to the eyeball test that prevents you from having the Alabama versus LSU again that even got us to the playoff in the first place. I mentioned it earlier on Triple Option. The SEC forgets that the reason that we have this in the first place is that their dominance of the conversation and all of that weighted all this stuff produced the most boring national championship that could have been created, and didn't solve a lot of the problems about it. So, but they don't want that part of their history known. There's all these things that come into it because you have human beings on the committee with agendas and historical perspectives and all that. You don't need a historical perspective. You need a what's happened from August 24th until December 6th. Those are the things that matter, and balance it out, and don't say, well, Ole Miss beat this team and this team, and Iowa State lost to this team and this team. Okay, well, the losses, compare the wins. Don't do it by the history of it, do it by the now.
Yeah, and the part about, you mean to tell me that they would win 3 games in the SEC, or you mean to tell me that Georgia and Alabama wouldn't beat them? That's really not how we're supposed to do it.
No, and and that's the thing is, honestly, I'm not trying to give power to Travis in his jorts on Twitter that's saying that, because that's sometimes who it is. It's not like it's anybody that actually has a say in it. And I don't like also kind of talking about this for some reason, because it always comes across as like it's anti-SEC. And that's not really my intent. It's not their fault the voters vote them the way that they do.
No, it's not.
It's not their fault the TV networks love them. They've earned that, if anything else. So I'm not trying to be anti-SEC. It's just that you already see the narrative being built of their 3 losses aren't the same as this team's 1 loss. And it's like, what the are you talking about? At some point, winning and losing has to matter, but that's when all of a sudden the eye test comes into play.
Yeah.
It's like, Ole Miss would lose. Ole Miss would dust BYU by 14. It's like, do you know that? Do we really know that? No, we don't. Here's an idea. Let's put them in the playoff, and they can play, and we can actually see. But again, it's not to be anti-SEC. It's just you put out the narrative already. Heather Dinich is the voice of the committee. That's her job, is to basically be their parrot and tell everybody what's coming and what is kind of the mood in the room. And so you're already hearing week 2 of this thing. Well, be ready for a possible 3-loss SEC. And so
it's only the second week of the standings, too.
Right, and I'm Mr. Let's let this thing play out. And I didn't go overboard on last week's rankings because of that. But I just don't like how that's already being set up, because I think that's not something that gets applied across the board.
By the way, I sent a text to a couple of different people that cover Utah yesterday. Kyle Whittingham had his press conference, and obviously yesterday, the weekend before, was all the mess of Utah, BYU, as far as the drama, the questioning of the integrity, professionalism by their AD. And I'm fans too, Mark Harlan. This is the response I got. Sorry, it's been a busy day. I think this is about Mark Harlan and just the overall mood in Salt Lake City. I think there's been tons of frustration, obviously. There's a good subset of fans that want Harlan gone for this. Now, I texted back about for this as in him storming the field and getting into the face of officials or what, which I would think that's what that is. But there's a note from somebody that covers Utah pretty heavily about where they were, at least from yesterday evening. He's worn out. Basically, you could tell he was worn out. Covering a game, next thing you know, there's 4 other sidebar stories.
Yeah, I mean, the Mark Harlan talking to the official after the game, which the first time I saw that clip, I didn't even realize that was him.
Well, he had a beanie on.
Yeah,
Utah Utes, yep.
I didn't even realize that was him initially, and then after the fact, I'm like, oh, gosh, that on top of everything else and everything else that would follow even beyond that. I mean, I said it yesterday, guys. I said this is like an untenable type of partnership that's going on right now, and something's got to give to cool the heat off a little bit. And so there's a couple of options. Utah, go join the Pac-12. I don't think you're really wanting to do that necessarily. Now, a segment of fans are like, I'd do it in 5 seconds. I've seen the tweet. Guy would rather play Oregon State and everybody else that's now joined the fray and Wazoo than play the Big 12 teams. You can find everybody who has a certain side of the argument, on social media. So there's Utah fans that would take that gladly. I don't know if they'd like the checks that come with that, though. So there are reasons why
that's why they left.
There's reasons why you joined the Big 12 to begin with. It had nothing to do with playing people closer to you or the fun trips that you take. But I understand that you're also not worried about money as a Utah fan. You just want to enjoy, playing teams closer or whatever. So there's a valid reason to want all of that. But, in terms of the situation on Saturday night, my whole feeling coming out of it was like something has to give here, man. Either you guys are going to kind of change the attitude and the perception of sort of how you've entered the Big 12, or you're going to have to force that change. And I mentioned it. Is that with Mark Harlan eventually being gone as AD?
Well, is
that Kyle Whittingham finally retiring? Is that both happening at the same time? That's how I felt, and that's how I still feel like that might be what it takes to kind of change that narrative around them in the conference. And I don't think being in the good graces of the conference is like their ultimate number one, priority on the to-do list. But I don't think this is a fun thing to do the next few years, is be the toxic outsider that just bitches about every little thing and everybody hates. Texas could do that because Texas was big enough that they just kind of bounced off them like wearing a bulletproof vest. Same thing with Oklahoma. They just go out and win the Big 12 every year, and you couldn't really say anything about it. Utah doesn't have anything to stand on. Nobody cares that you almost won a couple of Rose Bowls or that you won the Pac-12 a couple of times. Like, K-State doesn't give a damn about that. Baylor doesn't care. Even the teams that haven't won the Big 12 don't really care that much about you doing that. The teams that just left had a combined 11 national titles and like 10 Heisman. That's having some oomph behind you where you can throw your weight around a little bit. Buddy, you walk in the room, you are eye to eye with everybody. If not looking up a little bit, you just can't admit it because of pride. So something has to give there, and if it was a change in leadership, that would not surprise me at all.
One, they didn't want to leave the conference. I commend them for that. They did not want the Pac-12 to dissolve, and they had success. Really a lot of success in that conference. I get that. They were quoted, various presidents and ADs and whoever else quoted during that what seemed like agonizing 12 to 18 months about what was going to happen. They have won big games. They had done really well in the Pac-12. But in the end, they left. They left because there was nothing left. They left because there was no money. So they can bitch and moan about the Big 12 if they want. Bottom line is they came in on a heater and their ego, and right now they are not anywhere near who they thought they were going to be. And don't blame that on the quarterback, because other teams have had quarterback changes and injuries too, even though we know Cam Rising was pretty good. I'm tired of hearing how Utah is so good, and this year you have been an absolute dumpster fire.
I will also say this. I find it hilarious. I think Garrett and I talked about this yesterday. I find it hilarious that a guy is complaining about the Big 12 officials that just came out of what conference?
Oh, the worst officiating call I've ever seen came from the Pac-12. I mean, the worst officiating call I've ever seen in my life until the day I die.
I brought this up because I love when Craig goes off on this. But
Oregon and Oklahoma. Yep.
What did Pac-12 like? This is not just Craig who Oklahoma got screwed by the Pac-12. This is Pac-12 fans themselves would complain they complained about two things: Larry Scott and the officials for years and years and years and years. So then you're not even through your first full season in the Big 12, and you're mad that you forget about how chaotic the Pac-12 officiating was? Come on.
That was as much the After Dark thing. Was their tagline was the Pac-12 officials. That was the other kind of like little thing. Their little label was Pac-12 officiating. We all like just laughed and pointed and knew what goofy business it all was. But I also want to say, like, as much as people are reveling in Utah's pain, I don't like my whole thing here is I don't want them to be that team. Like, I do think they're playing a good villain right now, but the villain is only that good when they actually fight back a little bit. So, like, Darth Vader, if he just got his ass kicked all the time, like, would he be that big and scary or that menacing that you go up against? You're like, oh, man, we got to go up against this guy. Like, going up against Utah now, it's like the same thing as going up against anybody. It doesn't mean anything. But if they could return to their success and be that team, that's great. The Big 12 needs them to be the Utah of the Pac-12 and the Utah of the independents, the non-Power 5 before. They need that. People should want that. It's just the way they entered was so loud and obnoxious that people are reveling in the fact that they're not that. But I hope they do get back to that, because I'm not rooting for their failure. I'm not like Mr. Choose a side. You're either BYU or Utah. Like, I'm just looking at both sides going, I want you both to be great, and the Holy War was awesome. Congratulations. That ending was weird, but congrats to the winner. So I hope they get their ducks in a row. I just don't know how Mark Harlan is particularly going to kind of change the narrative around his leadership and this league, because it's just been so toxic, and Saturday was just the cherry on top of that. So I don't know how you reverse that narrative if you're Utah.
I think that the fine and the reprimand should not even be about the press conference. I think it should be how he acted as the game was winding down.
That could have been fair, yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit too much into somebody's space. And I get, man, I have anger management. I understand that, but I don't sometimes. But I'm just telling you, I thought that was the part that was the worst. Also, I want to go back to what you said. I want to clarify, because somebody in the chat said, let's see here, Craig, Texas and Oklahoma didn't win the Big 12 every year. Check the records. Yes, okay, won it a lot, but not every year. I don't think – did you say that?
No, I didn't say anything.
11,
he was
you said
talking
11
about,
national titles and a bunch of Heisman Trophy winners.
The old barn cat, go K-State. It's one thing to help clarify something. It's another thing when you quote somebody or misquote somebody. Be careful with that, because I heard what he said. He was not talking about Texas and Oklahoma winning it every year. We know that. He was mainly talking about OU winning 11 of the Big 12 titles, and one time 6 in a row.
I'm talking about they could actually throw their weight around, because they had multiple national championships and multiple Heisman winners. I didn't say anything about conference championships, I don't think, at least, and that wasn't my overall point. They had reason to act the way that they did. Utah has no reason to act the way that they have acted in some cases, because they appeared in a couple of Rose Bowls and won the Pac-12 a couple times. That was my point. If you had won 5 national titles and you had 3 Heisman Trophy winners, then walk in the league and say, like, nobody can match this, we're the best. And you know what? You'd have a reason to believe that. But you're not walking in with any of those things. So because you've been relatively successful for a long time, that's not impressing Kansas State. That's not impressing Baylor. It's not impressing TCU. And for no reason should they feel like they're inferior in any way. So that whole attitude walking in was perplexing to begin with.
Well, the Utes beat Baylor 2 years in a row. So but I get what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. They are having a miserable year. Would you? Did I ask this yesterday? Who's had a more miserable year,
Yes.
Utah or Oklahoma State?
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't really.
I think they're both the same. Okay, let's get on with a couple of other notes.
That's actually like, which kind of hepatitis would you rather have?
Right, yeah.
A or B? And you're like, I don't
I've
want
never
hepatitis.
had. Which one's worse?
I don't know. I have no idea. Like,
The
either way,
NCAA.
you've got hepatitis.
Yeah, the NCAA investigating Central Michigan head coach Jim McElwain in the Connor Stallions sideline presence. This is an investigation apart from what the NCAA inquiry into Michigan and also the sign-stealing scandal. Remember, there was a picture of him on the sideline. It kind of was a part of everything else that was going on during that time. Now, also, there is a report, and I don't know this for sure, and I tried to look it up, that even McElwain has already said that he may be leaving at the end of the year. But this is, I'm kind of over at Connor Stallions. I didn't watch the documentary or whatever that was, but I'm kind of over him, and here we are with him popping up because of the sideline presence. And now, a year later, the NCAA is going to look into it. That's one of their problems. A year later, why don't you wait 2 or 3 more years? But here we go with this.
Yeah, I mean, they do need to look into it. And I just find this intriguing because there was no way in the way that Central Michigan responded last year that Jim McElwain was not involved in that. And there's got to be some kind of way. Now, if you told me if a guy came up and said, hey, I'm doing this, I need to be on there, and you kind of knew that he was innovating new ways of sign stealing, and I might say, you can come watch on our sideline if you tell us how you do it, maybe do a little consulting for us on the side. Like, those are the kind of things that I like, that might be conspiracy theorist or like in my brain. But Jim McElwain clearly knew about Connor Stallions, clearly knew about it and knew about it beforehand and didn't think he'd get caught because of the way he responded last year. He responded like a guy, like, oh, well, Mr. President, the intern was under your desk. And he's like, well, that's the definition of is and never was.
Why do you have to blame him?
I just want to do my impression.
Let him tell his joke.
Yeah, I just wanted to do my impression. That's all.
Yeah.
I thought I was validating your joke.
Yeah,
Excuse
let
me.
me get to the punchline first. No, yeah, it was good. I'll blame. Yeah.
Shedeur Sanders has been named a couple of national honors, including the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. Had the big comeback win against Texas Tech and threw for a lot of yards and really was good. I thought he kind of gutted it out in that game. He's not as mobile as I sometimes thought he is, but he was able to run the ball at key times. But he had a huge game, 291, 3 touchdowns, and also ran for a touchdown. He is the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award winner. He also won the Davey O'Brien Award. Craig, you're a part of this. I'm a voter in this. It was down to Milroe and Shedeur Sanders, and there were a couple of others. Of course, there's always great nominations, but Shedeur Sanders wins it for this time, the first time as far as the weekly award.
Yeah, and I don't really get it. I'll be honest with you. Why was he selected over Milroe? And for you, at least, was it because LSU just gives up quarterback runs, so it's not appreciated as much?
No. We have had Kirk Bowles, who now is at the Houston Chronicle, was working for the Austin American-Statesman, is one of the lead guys among the voters of the board, and he has asked before about who has also already been honored. That doesn't mean you can't be honored 2 or 3 times, but he has used that in the past. He actually voted initially for Quinn Ewers, who threw 5 touchdowns and they dominated Florida, but then he said, but I can handle Milroe too. But I went with Shedeur Sanders, who has not won it, has had a big game. He's had bigger games, but I just felt like because of what they did, who they beat, and how they beat them on the road, to me, even though Alabama was on the road, I took Shedeur in this particular. I'm not the only voter, by the way. It's a democracy. And so that's how I voted and why I voted for Shedeur. Remember, I also got scolded earlier in the year, and rightfully so, because I got a little pissy about it. I voted for Jalen Milroe to win it like in weeks 2 or 3, and I was told, well, he will have his chance down the road, which he did. Not last weekend, but also I think in their win against Georgia. Was it Georgia? I can't remember who it was against, but that's why I went on, and I'll go on record as saying that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Shedeur is a fine choice. I think that going into Death Valley at night and running for 4 touchdowns and nearly 200 yards is pretty damn special, like in a top 15 game. So I was just surprised when I saw a bunch of people going Shedeur. It's like, man, I get Lubbock's a tough place to play, but I think Baylor's went and beat their ass by like 4 touchdowns there like 3 weeks ago. So it's not like as daunting as it has been in the past. So I was caught off guard. Normally, I guess the SEC did not get the benefit of the doubt here. So it was just surprising to me to not see that, because Milroe's rushing performance was so electric, but Shedeur was also really good. The offense was kind of come and go there in some spots for them, but going to Lubbock and playing against a feisty Tech team is tough, and he toughed it out in that game and made some big plays. So I'm not against the pick. I was almost positive Milroe would win based on doing what he did on the road, but that's a couple of great candidates and makes for a great race to the finals here.
Speaking of quarterbacks, the Davey O'Brien has released their 16 semifinalists, and then they'll whittle this down and then eventually have a winner like all the other major awards. Here's a list. There's 8 on each one of these graphics, and you see the names. I love that Bryson Daly's on this list. Quinn Ewers, of course, had the 5 touchdowns and could have thrown for 9 in that game last weekend. Navy's quarterback Blake Horvath is on it. Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, and also SMU's Kevin Jennings will have his coach, Rhett Lashley, on a little bit later on. And then the other list, including Shedeur, Milroe, Diego Pavia, Klubnik, Mateer, Retzloff, Rourke at Indiana, who's had an amazing year, and Cam Ward. That's 16 really, really good names right there.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. Rourke, you want to talk about a tough guy. Broke or hurt his thumb 2 weeks later, came back and has been well, a 10-0 team. John Mateer is super fun to watch. Looking forward to the future for him. And congratulations to Cade Klubnik. I know that I'm not a Clemson lover by any stretch of the imagination, but his jump from last year to this year has been really, really nice to see for someone who's worked hard for it. I also think it's good news for Garrett Riley because last year I think Garrett Riley was running Dabo's offense that Dabo wanted to run. Then they got in a situation this year where I think Dabo, and very wisely, and he's done this before, said, well, why don't you run Garrett Riley's offense? That's why I brought you here. And it's really paid off for Kate Klubnik.
Yeah, I thought that he was going to, I never thought he was going to disappear. He's too good of a player. But, Clemson, at least they're in the middle of it all.
By the way, I would like to humble brag that was me complimenting Dabo Swinney. So
nice. Yeah, I almost didn't know how to react to that.
Is it the holiday season that got to you?
I mean, maybe it is. Maybe I'm feeling just,
Well, I mean, it's Christmas throughout your house, so maybe that got to you.
Maybe like Dabo said, I'm made in God's name, image, and likeness.
You really were at one point the most Scrooge you could ever possibly be as a human being, and you've been neutered and lightened up.
I'm like the Grinch, when he slid down and his heart grew.
Yeah,
that's me.
There you go.
Same with Halloween. I'm on board for Halloween now.
Now you're overboard.
Yeah, I'm on
Missouri
board.
center Connor Tollison out for the year. Out for the year in the unbelievable crazy finish against Oklahoma yesterday. A redshirt junior offensive lineman, one of the best centers in the country, a guy that most likely will be very much involved as a professional athlete in the draft at some point. He is out second half against Oklahoma, left the field without putting weight on his leg, and he now is out for the year. Two coaches that kind of in my wheelhouse. John Robinson, former USC football coach. He was there twice. He coached the Rams. I love this guy. I interviewed him one time when I was on talk radio in East Texas. I had somebody that knew him and interviewed him one time. He was consulting, I think, at one point with the Saints. He passed away at the age of 89. He was just it seemed like a cheery guy, loved his teams when he was at USC, also with the Rams. He coached elsewhere, UNLV among others. He passed away at the age of 89. And then this story, Notre Dame was kind of trying to figure things out. So they went to a high school coach from Cincinnati. I believe it was from Moeller? And he was hired by Notre Dame. Did not work out. He replaced Dan Devine. Initially, I think there was a win or two that kind of caught everybody's attention. And then he eventually lost control as far as them winning. Their program struggled quite a bit. And he passed away also at the age of 89. That was a huge story. Andy Reid's a high school coach. That's still amazing to me. Former high school coach and where he is now with a, three-time Super Bowl championship.
Could you imagine, being a guy who was coached by Andy Reid in high school and going like, hey, we ran that same play.
Yeah. All right, Craig, we're going to give you a chance. You sent us an email earlier today back to the Utah-BYU game. Sent an early in the morning email about you saw an angle of that play that may have given you a different perspective on that specific play.
It wasn't early in the morning. It was late at night. What are y'all talking about? That's my world's different. That
perspective.
Was still hanging out.
No, I thought it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. That to me
that's
is
late at night.
Late
for
at
him.
night.
That's late at night for him. That's
okay, hold on. 1 or 2 in the morning is not early in the morning. 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah,
Come on.
But that's early in the morning for you.
Yeah.
Late at night for him.
All right.
Yeah, but early. I mean, what are you, a farmer? Like, what are you talking about here? Like,
What in the hell?
65. You early in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning is early in the morning. Go ahead. Do what you're gonna do.
So I saw this angle, and I don't know if we can post it or not. Okay, there it is. Here's an angle that this came out last night, and this is the BYU Utah nefarious call. And this is the first angle I've seen where I can go, okay, I understand the flag completely now. This is the first angle. Slow down there. I mean, you see all this right here.
Yep.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Still hanging on to him. Still hanging, like he's knocked him off balance with a tug. That angle I had not seen up until last night, and I eventually saw it after the show ended and got settled in. And so when I did, I immediately go, okay, that's interesting, and watched it a couple times, and I sent it because I feel like that's the first angle that I've seen personally, and maybe you guys already have seen that angle. There was like a million different versions, but that one was the first for me to see where I go, all right, I totally understand that call in that situation now. And I'm not somebody who says you can't throw that in that situation. I say throw the flag if it's a flag in any situation. Now, you may lighten it up just a tad bit late in a game like that, not to do, well, basically what you did. But I feel like the flag is way more justified having seen that angle than the other angles. And certainly in real time, like that seemed like the biggest crock in the world in the moment without any replays. But, it was also, you're in the heat of it and you're not watching the slow motion or even that part of the play when the ball snaps. So I feel like, okay, I'll freely say, no, that's the angle the official had. I totally understand it versus kind of wondering, like, how do you throw that in that situation when you don't have that particular angle?
It will be argued forever, like 50 years from now. Remember, here in the chat room, since you brought that up, both hand fighting, let them play. He almost pulled him down.
Right,
I
know.
Clint Moses, I don't see it. And that's the angle of the referee. By the way, the official who threw the flag, I thought it was the one who was like the linesman or whatever. It was thrown pretty quickly. It wasn't thrown initially when there was contact, but I saw the angle where he threw that while the play was still in progress. I was wondering about, did that flag come in late? It did not.
And I'm not even saying that I would throw that in that situation, but I'm saying I can understand the official in that particular angle. Looking at that, I can understand where that came from as opposed to just blindly wondering, like, how did you throw that in that situation? Now I at least see it. I don't necessarily agree with it. And here's the thing. We could show the most blatant hold, and there will be a Utah fan that goes, I don't see anything.
Yeah. No, I get it.
I mean, we can go round and round, but I'm just saying for me personally, I get it a lot more after seeing that angle than I did Saturday and Sunday.
We need to break.